Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, to declare the fifth forum of innovative financial technologies, invited to the platform is the governor of the Central Bank of Russia, Ms. Elvira Nabiullina. Thank you. Good morning, dear friends. I am happy to welcome you to our fifth forum of financial technologies. Those of you who have been to the first forum, it was 5 years ago in Kazan, and we discussed FinTech as promising, but something which is far away, the vision that will affect the financial sector. We can see now that the FinTech technologies are transforming the finance sector, and it is a significant factor affecting the financial sector, and no companies could be successful without FinTech in the industry. And there are huge changes taking place thanks to all of you who got together here at this forum. No matter what your name is, whether you're a bank, insurance company, investment management company, tech company, you are all high-tech companies. And once again, I would like to emphasize that without technological, innovative technologies, success in the industry is not possible. We have emphasized over and over again that the FinTech changing the world, many advantages are open for both consumers and industries, making the financial products convenient for the users. But of course, there are intrinsic risks associated with it for regulators as well. So not only financial sector, but the regulators will have to change to meet the challenges. 5 years is an anniversary, and I recall the work of the first forum in Kazan. We've been discussing regulations, and we promised from the stage that our regulation will be soft. We will try not to strangle the companies in our regulatory embrace. We will be treading carefully, and we will be analyzing the risks which might emerge, and then we will undertake the regulations. Sometimes it will have to be strict to protect the markets and to protect the consumers. And I think it is time now to discuss what the regulation will be in the future. That's what the first panel will be about. The forum is important to us in the following respect. We are discussing the challenges, the issues in cooperation with business, and we define the priorities of our activities. You might remember last year, all together, we discussed what projects should be supported by the regulator to open up opportunities for the FinTech companies to develop. We have identified 4 technologies: fast payments, biometry, digital profile, and marketplace. These were the areas that we have been debating on, and we have advanced in some of the areas quite a lot, and we are lagging behind in the other areas. And I think we should once again discuss those priorities to identify what corrections, what adjustments should be made, and to define new priorities for the future together with the business. That's what we believe our mission is, to set up the conditions for the development of FinTech that is changing, transforming the world, and at the same time regulating the the market and protecting the market from the emerging risks. I think altogether we will be able to discuss these issues, and hopefully the participants will get interested in it, and we will exchange opinions. There'll be new contacts and alliances and collaborations set up, and we will undertake to set up a favorable regulatory environment. So first panel session, it is a regulatory fast track for FinTech. And I would like to invite the participants of our panel. I will introduce them to you, and we will start the discussion. And I am sure it will be interesting for you. I would like to invite our participants, our panelists. Mr. Fan, Deputy Governor of the People's Bank of China. Welcome. Mr. Fan is in charge of the issues of the digital state currency in China. I think you will be interesting. It's high on the agenda. He's also in charge of the cryptocurrency, blockchain, accessibility of the financial services, and the development of e-payment. Let us welcome Mr. Fan. Mr. Emrah Şener, Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey. He is a member of the Monetary Policies Committee. He is in charge of the monetary policy issues, developing the strategy for the development of the national currency. Turkey is the country which is of high interest for us in terms of capitalizing on their experience. Welcome. Mr. Erbolat Dossaev, Governor of the National Bank of the Republic of Kazakhstan. There are many initiatives that were put forward for the development of the financial technologies, and we will be highly interested in the experience of Kazakhstan on the implementation on risk-oriented oversight covering FinTech as well. Mr. Herman Gref, Chairman of the Executive Board, CEO of Sberbank. It is our largest bank, and indeed, they want to stop being a bank, and they're developing ecosystems, platforms, and services, starting from e-commerce, commerce to medicine, and they're the front runners of the high tech. Mr. Roberto Tittarelli, Executive Vice President, Mastercard. He's in charge of the sales and new payment platforms development in Europe, and something that we are very much interested. We used to think that plastics is a new technology. It's conventional business now, and the companies are developing new technologies, and they are introducing those, implementing those. And Mr. Arunan, Tharmarajah, head of the banking of TransferWise company. TransferWise is a multi-currency transfer platforms for minimum commission. It is one of the expensive startups in Europe, and I hope Mr. Tharmarajah will give us the secret of his success. Before we open the discussion, I would like to turn to all the participants of the forum. You can ask the speakers questions. You can log in into the Finapolis applications and log in, enter your questions, and I will read it out to the panelists. I hope that there will be time left to ask your questions for the panelists. A few words of what we would like to discuss today. Indeed, the technologies are a driver for the development of both financial organizations and tech companies. And FinTech, for many banks and for other financial organizations, which we refer to as conventional participants of the financial markets, open up new opportunities when marginality of the conventional products and services is going down, when there is a regulatory pressure is on the increase in the traditional areas. And we can see that FinTech for many conventional companies is the way to outreach to the customers to offer a new range of products and services, new services that are not offered by the traditionals. And the response of the FinTech is an opportunity for fast and large-scale introduction of their technological developments for the financial sector and the consumers of the products and services of the financial sectors, both retailers and physical persons and businesses are responsive to the new innovative technologies. In this country, it is more so than in the other countries. They are hungry for the new technologies. New technologies transform the financial sector. It is obvious and the new prospects are open, but it is the area of activity of the regulators. New technologies emerge, some of them die, some of them develop, and they are inbuilt into the financial service, changing the configuration, and it's a huge challenge for us because we, the regulators, on the other hand, we should tread carefully. We do not want to strangle the progress, to stymie the progress, as they are saying. But at the same time, we are apprehensive of the risks which we are not aware of. Something that we do not know. There are certain uncertainties because new technologies is associated with uncertainties, and the regulators feel responsible for the new risks. So that's why today we will discuss the issue with the regulators, how they think they should interact with the companies, with the conventional companies and the FinTech companies, start-up companies, to work out, to elaborate a new model for regulations. I am sure that it should be a new model of regulation. And should the regulators oppose something? Should the regulators oppose cryptocurrencies? And wouldn't we throw the baby with the water out of the bath and bathtub? And what is the role played by the regulator? Should the regulator be a referee, or should the regulator be a coach present at the pitch and to develop the market? And how could the regulators, being national, cope with the operations of the FinTech? The activity of those is cross-border and transnational. It is a challenge, it's a controversy, and how we should respond to such a challenge. I will begin with a question for the regulators. We will discuss what challenges do exist at different markets, and of course we would like the financial companies would voice their concerns and what is necessary for the FinTech to develop their business, and what are your expectations from the regulators. And on the whole, will there be any need for regulators in the bright new world, or the market itself will regulate all the processes on its own? So many questions put, and We will start discussing those at the first panel. We will keep going today and tomorrow. And I would like to start with a question for Mr. Fan. China, moving fast in the digital epoch, and we see the financial innovations are being advanced in China. However, a very tough stance with respect to cryptocurrencies and ICO is taken. There was a ban on transactions with cryptocurrencies and ICO. Do you think this ban is effective, taking into account that the technologies are of transnational, cross-border nature, and it is very difficult to ban all those in one individual country? Will you share your experience with us? Thanks a lot for your question. The digital currency issue is high on the agenda in China. Sometime before, we have taken some regulatory measures. In 2013, we have been dealing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is something special. It's a special product, and we used to demand from the financial organizations to start the circulation of Bitcoin, but we needed to receive all the necessary digital data to analyze the situation. Later, in 2017, the idea was to control the issuance of the cryptocurrency and to regulate, to prevent the free circulations, because there were a lot of uncertainties associated with it. Besides, we have defined the requirements for the ICO, and no ICO were allowed without any constraints, no free ICOs. And another requirement was to prevent using cryptocurrency for financial transactions. And the prices should not, for the goods and services, should not be nominated in cryptocurrencies. And many stakeholders at the financial markets respond to our feedback, and many deals and transactions did not use cryptocurrency. There's another issue which is quite complicated. It is providing insurance for the risks. So before using cryptocurrencies, it is necessary to have the framework for insurance. And so if ICO is there, which is not fully legal, we needed the notification of such an ICO. The measures taken were effective. The risks of dealing in cryptocurrencies have been diminished. And we have eliminated the risks. However, some are left. You have mentioned, you were true, that it's an international activity, and even if we ban it in China, it doesn't mean that the transactions will not take place in the rest of the world. We need similar regulatory measures to be undertaken in Russia and in the other countries, and all the regulators should act accordingly.
Well, we've seen two areas of this discussion going in parallel. On the one hand, we've been seeing the bans on ICOs and cryptocurrencies. On the other hand, we've seen that China has started actively considering issuing of its own national digital currency. And we see a lot of publications in the media on this issue, and we see them writing that China is almost ready to launch its own crypto digital currency. What is your take on that? We, as the Central Bank of Russia, have also been analyzing this issue. We're still analyzing it, and it's not quite obvious to us that it is necessary to launch our national digital currency, not just due to technological reasons, but also simply to analyze what are the actual advantages of creation of a national digital currency as compared to the existing digital currencies and non-cash payments. There are a lot of risks, while the advantages might not be that obvious. So we would request you to share with us your vision regarding the prospects of issuance of your own national digital currency by your central bank. Thank you for the question. Well, in the Central Bank of China, I'm responsible for digital currencies and the related research, so I would be happy to comment on the issue. At the moment, the digital is generally very well developed in China, and what we are analyzing at the moment in particular is digital currencies. We've started doing that back in 2014. By 2015, we've considerably increased our research and the number of digital currencies we've analyzed. So I believe for the Central Bank of China, it has to be a replacement to M0. It seems to be a very important tool of electronic payments. So if we're saying M1 or M2, cryptocurrency is not suitable for that. That is actually the so-called M0. So you've asked about different tools. I can tell you that we have 6 different areas of work in this regard. First and foremost, for the central bank, it is necessary to make sure that there is so-called state digital currency. And the CBDC is to be used on the state level and is to be issued by the government. So it will be a very safe currency, a very secure one, and it has to be a tool for electronic payments. It has a certain strength in the commercial aspect of that, a high credit rating. But it is important that the Central Bank of China is the only issuer of it. So this currency has to be state currency. So it is important for us that this type of currency is offering different levels of services and is supportive to the managing organization, but it is not supposed to be a monopoly. And of course, it has to be compliant with the expectations of the business community. So we by no means want to create a monopoly in the market. And that is the objective to be tackled by the Central Bank of China. Thirdly, the CBDC has to be a generic product. And first and foremost, it has to serve the interests of the people of China. Of course, we'll pay particular attention to the preservation of personal data and provide maximum safety and security. Of course, there will be a commercial component to that. And it is therefore vital for us to take proper care of the personal data protection. Fourthly, speaking of the commercial banks that might create their own cryptocurrencies, we've analyzed this issue very carefully, and we believe that it cannot impact the actual account of the user. Well, payments are basically settlements. So for a commercial bank, it is important for us to leave a choice up to them. We are worried that cryptocurrencies might be used for money laundering purposes, and we have to bear in mind this danger all this time. And that is the type of threat that we'll be able to mitigate if we will be the ones issuing digital currency. That is why we've taken a decision to support and promote the idea of CBDC. So the cryptocurrency issued by the central bank has to be competitive. Of course, we are going to enter into partnership with other state cryptocurrencies. As you know, many countries are working in this area, creating their national cryptocurrencies. There is Libra, created by Facebook, and Chrome. We've been analyzing those cases, and we believe this is the area that we should work on with other countries by developing and elaborating on the standards for digital currencies. Those are the aspects we need to focus on. Thank you for your answer. Indeed, it is a very exciting project. So how do you think? What is the actual horizon of this project? When will it become up and running? Will that happen in the nearest future? What is the degree of readiness of the central banks to do that? Many are thinking of it. Thank you for the question. Well, we do not have a clear timeline for the launch of the project and start of the issuance of the CBDC, but the key thing for us is that we're working on that, and we're actively discussing the issue with various commercial banks and different structures. We are analyzing all the details. That is why, at the moment, we're at the stage when it is necessary to make this work truly systematic. We'll provide a general report on that, and afterwards, we will study once again the experience of other countries and other central banks. How high is the demand for the cryptocurrencies? What are their key functions? We also plan to expand the scope of functions of digital currencies. Once this work is completed, we'll think of the issue, and then we'll have more clarity on the timeline. And I guess all the banks will have to go through this work as well. Thank you. Thank you. If I may, one more question. We've seen lately, in August, China published a plan for the development of FinTech for 2019-2021. That is an overwhelming document covering key areas of development of financial technologies. Can you please share with us the detail of this plan? What particular initiatives do you plan to implement and promote in the area of financial technologies? What are the key areas of FinTech that you plan not to regulate? Yes, indeed. In August, we've published our FinTech development plan. The Central Bank of China has spent a lot of effort on this research. A lot of structures of ours were engaged in the process. We've questioned many different financial structures on this issue. And we hope that creation of this plan would provide the following impact. First of all, it has to cover 4 different areas. The first one, it is important for us that the whole mechanism of regulation is becoming more efficient, and we always encourage various financial structures to introduce different innovative technologies. We hope that the technological solutions would be found and new products would be launched, mostly the products in the area of insurance. Secondly, we expect different technological companies to be engaged in this process. We count on their competence and expertise. Very frequently, we see a combination and symbiosis of both financial and technological experts. That's the type of talent we need to recruit. Thirdly, it is important for us to work on the enhancement of quality and the level of services. Traditionally, the sector of services in China was quite weak. It's been actively developing over the last several years, though. We also need to actively use the AI, big data, the Internet of Things, all those new technologies in order to enrich our financial products and expand the scope of financial operations, so that various companies, not just state enterprises, but also private companies, can get all the benefits of financial solutions and use new financial models. We also have to remember about the interests of the SMEs. Very frequently, the level of financial services they get are way too expensive. So we need to make them more affordable, and of course, we need to work constantly to enhance the quality of services. We also need to create a system of clear rules of the game for introduction of innovations for different type of financial innovative products. There must be a clear fast track for implementation and application. And also, we need a clear regulatory framework for it to develop. It is also necessary to create the proper platform enabling to do different risk assessments and bring different stakeholders to interact together on this platform. For that, we need new technologies, biometrical technologies, face recognition technologies in order to develop this platform. We also need to work on analytics and data analytics. Apart from data collection, we need to enhance the quality of data analytics. Risk management is, of course, an important issue, and we need to bring it up to a new level as well. The process of financial decision-making has to be more integrated. It has to become more transparent to make sure that this development is balanced. We need to set up a new mechanism, a highly efficient one, using the best new technologies. If we take a look at the global situation, it can be said that the financial sector is developing very quickly. And there are many different solutions on the market. For example, very frequently we need the confirmation, the proof of identification, and it all requires a lot of processing of personal data. However, when we talk about introduction of new technologies, we need to bear in mind the threats they're carrying. And of course, we need to work efficiently with big data, create big data sets. But we also need to bear in mind the issues of safety and security. Personal data protection is becoming extremely important, but that's what we're trying to cover in one system. Thank you very much. That was indeed very interesting. You use systemic approach to promotion of financial technologies, and several times you've mentioned that we need clear rules of the games, and we see that today in Russia the market is also willing to have those clear rules of the games, especially when we see new players coming to the financial market. And many countries are introducing special licenses for new players of the market, be that virtual banks, neobanks, different licenses for FinTechs. And we see that in Turkey, innovative payment services are used broadly. As far as I know, there is no special regulation for FinTech companies offering those services. And as far as I know, you have not introduced any special licenses. How do you think? Is that type of regulation sufficient? Or do you think that as the market evolves, you might change the regulation? Do you see any risks in the emerging areas? That is my question to Mr. Şener, Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Turkey.
Many thanks, Elvira, for your kind invitation. In Turkey, we have two separate bodies. One is the banking regulation agency. The other one is central bank, responsible from the licensing. But we are not licensing the fintech companies. After visiting some best practices, like China, a month ago I was visiting Yifei, and we decided to consolidate all this regulation and oversight capacity under one institution, and it will going to be Central Bank of Turkey. So the critical question right now is that how we will gonna, what is the optimal balance of regulating the fintech companies? So I think talking to Herman, CEO of the Sberbank, he gave an excellent example. He said Europe is lagging in terms of this fintech activities behind China. So when I was thinking about how Turkey Central Bank should approach to this this regulation issue, immature regulations gives us some example. Like in 1994, there was an attempt in Europe for the prepaid cards. But by then, the name of the institution was European Monetary Institute. There was an over-regulation. Even there was no activity for the prepaid cards. The activity completely stopped because of the over-regulation. So now, the same stance held by the European Central Bank. They are heavily regulating the e-money licenses. And for these e-money licenses, because of the, even there was no proven business track record, not a single application, because of the European Central Bank's heavy regulation on this one, there was no activity. The opposite thing happened in China. The Chinese Central Bank, People Banks of China, extended 260 e-money licenses to the companies. Just a few of them become extremely successful, and they have been invited to get a banking license. So I think this Chinese approach to the problem of immature regulation led it to grow, and then later on, you regulate this one, sounds like a good approach. I think Deng Xiaoping said, black cat, white cat, it is the best cat who catch the mice. So it's not about banking, it's not about fintech, it's about who provides the best services. And then you start regulating this activity. for a central bank, it is more of art than science. There is no observable set of parameters in the world that say, this is the best set of parameters to regulate this one. I think these kinds of platforms help us to learn from each other, and because you need to read your financial industry like a maestro reads his orchestra. If you understand well how it is the ecosystem is working, you can do well, but otherwise immature regulations like in Europe, you're lagging behind China.
Thank you.
So the regulator is not actually either a referee or coach, but a conductor, orchestra conductor. Okay, Turkey is currently developing a regulatory sandbox, if I'm not mistaken, in Russia. We have launched one, and we are piloting technologies, trying to understand what the risks are, introducing regulations to give a chance for the stakeholders to use the technologies. We have a head of Sberbank, a CEO of Sberbank, and Sberbank has participated in our sandbox, working over one of the project. We changed the regulation, and all the participants of the market can make use of these technologies. So one of the financial participants makes a contribution into the development of technologies. However, the regulatory sandbox is working in the testing environment. It's not a live work. What kind of sandbox would you like to create in Turkey, and what are your expectations from the regulatory sandbox?
I think it's a very good question, Elvira. We regard regulatory sandbox as a great tool to prevent illusion from reality. Sometimes you regard that innovation is a great innovation, might be a great security issue. So regulatory sandbox is a great tool to see the difference between illusion and reality, right? So in Turkey, we decided to definitely go for a strategy to empower this regulatory sandbox, but with the specific areas. Like one of them is the fast payment services, instant payments. The other one is KYC, and finally, anti-money laundering algorithms, right? Because a typical auditor 20 years ago goes to a bank for auditing, it was simple balance sheet ratios, right? But now, a mid-size bank in Turkey do almost 30 million transactions a year. The whole banking system is over 1 billion. How do you go and regulate this banking activity, whether it's in line with the regulations or not? So this auditing activity is something that we want to prioritize as a regulatory sandbox. We want to invite the companies, provide the data, even give them a temporary license, not a permanent one, but we want to see the results, the temporary license. If it's a proven business case and their license is permanent, but in the selective areas. So when I visited a month ago in China, the Ant Financial, they gave me a perfect example of what you can do with data. They talked about SMEs. Even the SME companies don't know they will gonna soon need a loan, but Ant Financial sent them a message, do you want a loan? This is all about data. If you know the cash flows, if you know when they will gonna need the loan, so you know in advance, even you can offer a loan that company even doesn't know that they need this one. The similar, I think it's all about data. As a Central Bank of Turkey, we have all this payment system data. So we can open a platform under a regulatory sandbox and invite companies to come and do some auditing and anti-money laundering algorithms, and help us, help the regulators to achieve their targets. So effectively, we will gonna definitely benefit from this regulatory sandbox, but we will not gonna tolerate, just for the sake of innovation obsession, we will not gonna let our payment system security we will not gonna tolerate this one just for the sake of innovation or obsession.
Thanks a lot. And indeed, the experience with the temporary licenses should be looked into. We might capitalize on your experience. And I would like to now ask the next speaker, Erbolat, and it's about the risk-oriented approach, and you are introducing it into the financial sector. What is the risk-oriented approach normally? You have to measure risks, but when we are referring to new financial technologies, the level of risks is hard to measure. Then how will you be implementing the risk-oriented approach in finance sector? How do you see it? Good morning, Irina Sahidzadevna. Indeed, since the 1st of January 2019, Kazakhstan has introduced risk-oriented approach, and there are a lot of questions raised, both by the participants of the market, but the regulators have questions as well. And there was a law enacted in Kazakhstan, and it was for the first time that we in Kazakhstan are trying not to over-regulate the market, but to launch a dialogue with the stakeholders in the FinTech and innovations environment. I would like to state right away that the market would like to have less regulations, and the regulators would like to regulate more, but unfortunately, as far as FinTech is concerned, the regulators will always be lagging behind, because the technologies are developing real fast. And take the issue of the regulatory sandbox. We have to understand what will the sandbox bring to us. Of course, the regulatory measures should be taken by the oversight and supervisors. There are pilots, there are startups, but if the pilots do not affect the market greatly, then should be provided a free rein for them to develop. And our company would like, our regulator would like to be a partner, and the central bank at the moment is running two projects. One is instant payments that has been introduced at the market. Indeed, there are some advanced technological institutions that have set up their own payment systems, and many has deviated from classical banking, and it is the FinTech activity with the additional services. There are some of the companies that are readying their IPO as FinTech companies, though the core activity is banking. And we treat all financial institutions individually, and the oversight and supervision should be adequate to the level of development of the financial institutions and what impacts it has on the market, and how ready this particular financial institution is ready to develop the product. We shouldn't forget about the consumers, both physical persons and companies. We have a case, it's an example. It is online credits. The online credit market accounts for 1%, but since 2015 till 2019, the growth rate is by the 23 times over. It's 1,100,000 people, and with the average annual growth rate 250. And of course, the regulator pays attention to that kind of issues. And mentally, we will have to change, because of course, the conventional regulation model is convenient. It is easier to ban, to prohibit things, but it is much more difficult to regulate it. And there was a question discussed by Mr. Van about the cryptocurrencies. Historically, the cryptocurrencies were forbidden in Kazakhstan. We didn't even consider the issues of licensing, but first steps were made, and we agreed that within the framework of IFC, we will start promote it, and we have a consensus now with the government. The legal provisions will have to be made, and it will be the first step when the regulator and some of the institutions, we have a regional financial center, we will make the first steps. So there is no classical experience anywhere in the world that we can borrow. So we are moving ahead by the way of trial and error. But of course, the regulatory measures for FinTech will be different from the conventional classical one. Thank you. And one more specific question. You have mentioned how fast is the development of FinTech in Kazakhstan, and one of the areas developing real fast, it is online crediting P2P, and it is this particular area that startups emerge, and the absence of regulation in this sector could be the source of risk. And we understand that those areas are developing because there is absence of regulations. So what are the trends, do you think? Will it be necessary to change approaches to regulation in this area? We think, indeed, the regulation is a must when we are talking about online credits or P2P. And I've given you some of the statistics, and 80–90% is online. And in 2018, we have taken some of the laws. It is the limit of marginality for such a type of companies. And a year and a half later, we reconsidered the criteria. There are some 40 companies working in this sector. And it turns out that marginality is higher, and they have invented, re-engineered new approaches for commissions and remuneration, and that's why in July 2019, commissioned by the government, we have developed new amendments, and microfinancing companies will be covered by regulations from the 1st of January 2020. It will be the central bank responsible for it, or after the reforms, there will be a special agency responsible for the regulation. I think the regulation will be adequate. Of course, it won't be as strict as it is for the banking sector. We understand the issues of equity of such microfinance microfinancing companies and the products and the services that they take to the market. And we will adopt a phase-out approach. There will be stages of regulation, and by the 1st of December we will finalize the legislation. There will be a transition period for FinTech company until the 1st of July, when they will have to meet the requirements for capital. So I think everything should be regulated, but it is the issue of the approaches, and the approaches will be worked out manually for each specific entity. But much depends on the consumers. If the consumers are happy with the quality of the services and the tariffs, the regulator shouldn't interfere. But if we ourselves see the risks, then in compliance with the applicable law, we have a leverage to take measures to channel the movement of the market in the right direction. Thank you. Thanks a lot. As a regulator, we started with regulators, but of course we understand that the drivers for the development of the FinTech is business. And that's why I would like to switch over to the issues of business, financial business development. And my first question is for Mr. Gref. And you know that when we are talking about the issues of the development of the market, challenges, we are debating what the role of the small stakeholders is. You are the largest dominating ecosystem at the Russian market, and how does it how does it feel to be the big one? It gives a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, it's the higher responsibility for the safety of operation, for the protection of the personal data. How are you addressing those issues? Thanks, Elvira. We are feeling fine. We are okay. And for the time being, the prospects are bright. So I hope we will not strangle you in our tender embrace. No. And when I heard the situation in Kazakhstan, I frankly shuddered internally. And you're right that all the technologies are developed by large player actors. 80% of innovations are generated by large companies in the world. Second, I think it is critically important for the large actors to play in accordance with the transparent rules. They should share their experience, they should share their innovations, and they should develop the space for the future activity. I mean is that we do have future if we are competitive, and we could be competitive provided the competition is there. And of course, small stakeholders, small companies are more adaptive, they are faster, and they will always be attacking the spheres of interest of the large companies. And though strange as it is, but it is the way of survival for large stakeholders. If the large companies ignore the small ones, it is the starting point of the decline for this big company. Of course, we feel what responsibility of our company is, and we try to be open and transparent. We are not unique in that. Yesterday, we have got a new Google library, and it is something that kick off the data analytics, big data analytics, and AI. And all the large and small companies make use of these technologies or take the cloud technologies or ledger technologies. And so our way is always to invest into innovation. Of course, there might be mistakes in the activity, but we are prepared to share both success and mistakes. We should not forget about cyber security and data protection. Last week, there was an incident in Sberbank, but thanks God, we survived it with minimum losses, and we did manage to contain it within a few hours after the incident. And so what conclusions could be drawn from this particular incident? We have disclosed information about this incident. We were the first to make the incident public, and we have uncovered the mechanism of this mishappening. And after the investigation of the incident is over, we are sure to bring in all the stakeholders and provide all the truth. So once again, we are open, and we are prepared to be open. So there is an institute that we have introduced. It is Chief Data Protection Officer, CDPO, and we will change the rules and the mode of operations to protect data from offenders from within. I think we have built a protection barrier from the attack from the outside, but the worst problem is the vulnerability from inside, when the insiders, our own staff, whose purpose is to protect this system, they are aware of all the vulnerabilities, and it is easy for them to crack it. And that's indeed the challenge. There were leaks even from such a formidable organization as CIA, and as a result of the whistleblowers inside. So how can we fight that kind of offenses and crimes? It is to build the security system, the safety system from the attacks from inside, and cooperate from the state. We have analyzed the experience, the global experience. One of the mostly highly spread crime in the world is phishing, and we have identified 135,000 phone numbers that were used to attack our customers. And the responsibility for phishing is no sentencing. The crime is not criminalized. 5 and 10 years in the U.S. and in Europe. Skimming, not in Russia. It's not a criminal offense. DDoS attacks. One can get a sentence for 7 years, but it is 20 years in the U.S. and sending spam messages. It is just fines in Russia, but jail sentence in the U.S. But it is not the issue of severity of the punishment. It is necessary to respond fast. As far as phishing is concerned, it's necessary to ensure cooperation between telecom regulators and law enforcement. If there is no coordination between these stakeholders, no matter how reliable protection system, you can not hold anybody liable. And so that kind of collaboration system is necessary to prevent crime in the banking. And that's why the responsibility rests with Sberbank as a largest player.
Thank you very much indeed. I totally agree to what you told about the level of responsibility and liability, because indeed cybercrime is exactly where we need to work together with all the stakeholders. And as a confirmation to what you just said, where we see key risks are also internal risks of the internal business process of the companies. When we're doing inspections of the banks as regarding their compliance with the requirements of the IT security, indeed we saw that many issues of security do not always include all aspects of internal IT security, and it has to be done. You said that all the biggest innovations are created by big players. I think not everybody in the audience would agree to that. Very frequently, innovations are created by small, agile and flexible companies. You introduce those innovations, you let them go big. And from your experience, we see that Sberbank frequently acquires those companies. You simply buy them, and many complain that you buy all the small companies and make them part of Sberbank instead of creating partnership with them, as many other big players are doing. And that would stand for the principles of openness. Those small startups remain in the market. Can you please clarify your strategies? Why do you prefer to buy those startups rather than creating partnerships with them? Why don't you play out the model of partnership? Well, I'd like to reiterate that when I was speaking about innovations, I first and foremost meant technological innovations. And there are very few technological innovations created by small companies. The statistic is quite stubborn. 80% go from big companies. As for information business models, there you're probably right. And most probably, small companies are much more inventive in this regard. And that's why they compete successfully with big companies. And frequently, small companies are somewhat faster in introduction of small innovations invented by big companies. Very frequently, big companies fail to apply those innovations. They might invent them, but they lack time and flexibility to implement them. And in this regard, small companies are much more efficient in introduction and implementation of those innovations. As for Sberbank, well, first of all, it sounds a bit like a myth. There are very few companies that we bought. If you take a look at how many companies JP Morgan in the US is buying and acquiring, well, on average, well, if we analyze their venture funds and the bank itself, there would be one company per week. Mr. Gref, I'm sorry, I'm not saying how much you buy as compared to international companies. I'm talking about how few independent companies are there in the market left. Well, I'll answer this question. There are very few companies we've bought, even compared to big players. Again, if we compare to our partners like Yandex or Mail.ru, we have more or less same tempos of acquiring companies. And as for the principle and the philosophy of the companies we buy, first of all, we only buy the companies. We actually normally do not buy the controlling stock. If we see that this is the company related to our core business or certain core technologies, we buy it. And there are many more companies that we enter into partnerships with. And the same applies to the companies of our ecosystem. They're completely open to working with other partners and other players on the market. Just to cite an example, Several years ago, we created a company called Avatar. We created it from the scratch. Today, it is a big player on the market. It has around 30% share on the market and more than 50% on the market of smart terminals. But they work with around a dozen of different banks, and we're just one of the big partners. And it was never our plan to ban them from working with other banks. That would mean we would automatically restrict their natural growth. And it was just an example. Another example that relates to your previous question, we've invested a lot of money in HR issues and training. We opened up a school called 21. By the end of the year, we will have around 6,000 engineers studying there. We will open up another school in Russia soon. We're having a lot of discussions on that, whether we should allow the alumni to be hired by us only, because 6,000 engineers for Sberbank alone is not enough. And finally, we decided that we need to compete for every single alumni just like anyone else. So we are very delicate and cautious in buying companies or employees, and we do not keep this ecosystem closed. We have three types of approach. The first type of approach is that when we want to work with the competitors and we decide where we want to own a competitor. The second type of partnership is partnership when we have a stake in capital. And the third type of partnership is on the quality of services, when we do not want to participate in the partnership, we do not want to enter into the capital, but we want to secure a certain quality of services. Thank you, Mr. Gref. Nonetheless, I do believe that the question as to who is the key donor, big companies or small companies of innovation, it is important for us as a regulator to make sure that innovations are generated by both big and small players. And certainly, we are very much interested in the fact that whenever financial technologies are being developed, there is a place left for independent players. We want the ecosystems of big players to be open. Whenever there is a dominating system, openness is not enough for competition. Competitive environment is important. And speaking of the competitiveness, I'd like to touch upon another issue. The whole world is watching the prospects and even plans of big techs coming to the financial market. And many recognize it as a threat to the traditional financial institutions. Sberbank could be called a big fin. Will Big Fin be able to stand the competition with big techs on the Russian market? Is there a need for the national regulator to protect national markets? I know that many are discussing the challenges connected with Libra, cryptocurrency by Facebook. And it is a big question for many national regulators, how the potential entrance of such markets to the financial market can pose a threat to the competition and stability. Well, we are obviously aware of the advantages that big techs are bringing. What is your take on that? Whether the big fins will be able to stand the competition with big techs, and what do you expect from the regulator to do in this regard? Well, first of all, whether we are ready to stand the competition with the big tech, certainly yes. But with the same degree of certainty, we can always say no, because competition is not a solid state, it's a process. And the more rigid the competition is, the more competitive any industry is becoming. So I do not expect the regulator to start protecting us from the big techs. Thank God, Russia has never had an over-regulated market, and that is exactly why Russia is among top 5 countries having companies like Yandex and Mail, when nobody could have thought of an idea that they need protection. If we would have started protecting them, I'm not sure they would have emerged. I know the position of Google very, very well. I've been discussing it with them many times. Russia is one of the largest countries in terms of investment of Google in the country, because Yandex has created a huge headache for Google. And that is why Google has invested into the market. They've been using their competitive advantage, their operational system, Android, as another advantage. Nonetheless, their share of the market is around 35% and has never been higher, while Yandex has more than 60% of the Russian market, despite all the odds. The same can be said about Facebook, Instagram, and the rest. So I think we have all the necessary advantages to successfully compete on our home market for our share and our customers. I guess as soon as the regulator would start protecting us, we would all relax and lay down. It is better not to protect us. That would be the best stimuli for us to remain competitive. And finally, it's only the customers who would suffer from this excessive regulation. Of course, they are more competitive than we are. So far, we are not competitive to the extent that they own the technologies. They were born by technologies. They are native to these technologies, and we're not even yet ready for those technologies. So obviously, so far, we are less competitive than they are, but we're running really fast and working really hard not to oversleep the moment. But we're stronger than they are in the fin part, in the finance. We are much more competitive in this regard, and it makes our chances more or less equal. So I'm an optimist in this regard, and I think we are capable of protecting ourselves. No need to protect us by the regulator. And another thing I wanted to talk about is cryptocurrency. We've been discussing stablecoin lately. Again, I think we should not be rushing to regulate there. I do not believe in advanced centralized system. I don't want to offend anybody, but I do think that it is important to make sure that decentralized systems emerge and strive. But we have to see how they evolve. There is no threat on that side as compared to Bitcoin or traditional cryptocurrencies. And I think this technology will develop further. It creates great opportunities for development of ecosystem. Whether we will use Libra, I'm afraid no. Because most probably in Russia, a larger number of players will have their own plans on that. And another thing on regulation, everything connected with technologies. There are different aspects to that. And one of them is the issue of data protection and regulation of cross-border operations. That's a different part of it, and that is the part that can and should be regulated. Thank you very much. And as a follow-up, actually a question we received from the audience as a follow-up to what we were talking about. Let me read it out. Digital markets are being monopolized very quickly if a successful business model is found. Facebook, Google, Instagram, Yandex, such companies are unique for the whole world or for the local market. Such a company for the Russian market is the idea of Sberbank being more than bank and no longer a bank. Sberbank has the largest data set in the country. So question to us, how a regulator is planning to regulate and to enforce anti-monopoly regulation by providing access to this data set to everybody, including FinTech. So I readdress this question to you. Indeed, you have the largest data sets in the country. So we think that probably it is important to make sure that there is open API in place and access to data. You do not welcome this idea, and I think it would be interesting to hear your stance on that. Why, under those circumstances, regulation, and we talk of regulation has to make sure that if the owner of the data, the customer agrees, the access to this data is provided to everybody. Well, if the customer provides their consent to that, I see no problems to that. Of course, the consent of the customer, of the data owner, is the key dominant there. I do not think we object to that. That's the first time I hear. I think it is inevitable, and we cannot actually stand in the way of this development. So the question is that we acquire this data properly, but it's more of a question to the regulator, the informed consent of the customer. Yeah, this is exactly why we're developing a joint platform with the government, the platform for management of the consent on the data use by the data owner, by the customer. Apologies, if I may. As for the dominant position of Sberbank, well, thank God, in Russia we do have strong competitors, both in financial sector. In financial sector, our share has not been growing for many years, and that was our key position on that. It would be easy for us to increase our share in the banking asset system, and it was our conscientious choice not to increase our share over all those years. We have not acquired a single bank, and I believe that for Sberbank it is critically important not to exceed a certain share in the banking business. We've done international expansion after a clear incident. The international markets have been close to us. So the objective for us today is to stop being a bank as such. That's not right. We will not stop being a bank. Indeed, already today we are more than a bank, and we will certainly remain more than a bank, but that is a matter of survival of a company in a long-term run. There can be no 20 or 30 ecosystem. There would be less than that. And the magic figures on the market, on the digital market, is 60-30-10. The first market player will have 60% of the market, the second 30% of the market, the third player 10% of the market. So the question to the regulator is, how do you want to see this market? You want to have a competitive, developed market with more or less the same structure, 60-30-10, or either those will be your players or those will be external players, domestic players or international players. That's a matter of your choice. You can take a look at the US market. In China, they have exactly this situation, and many other developed countries have a similar situation. Many countries have started regulation earlier than needed. Europe is the example of the kind. So today we have to search for the ways of regulating a foreign ecosystem and of our own market. Russia is one of the top 5 countries in the world having national players, and we are very lucky to have them. Thank you very much. Now my next question to Roberto Tittarelli. We've been talking a lot about competition between different players on the market, but with the gradual development of FinTech, we've been seeing domestic competition growing, and we believe it is very important for companies like Mastercard. You're one of the global leaders in the segment of payment cards, and we see that new technological companies are heading to the payment segment by creating serious competition to your traditional business. And probably you should have this internal conflict. On the one hand, you want to monetize the benefits afforded by your CAD platform, by the technologies that you've been having earlier. But on the other hand, you realize that you have to develop the internal services that can compete with the new players. How do you see this dilemma? How do you treat it?
Oh, thanks very much for the question. First of all, I believe that we need to put the role of the regulators, let's say, into the context, into the right context. The regulators have seen firsthand the importance of technology. How do we manage, let's say, the incoming competition or the challenge brought by FinTech, let's say, and the big tech? Our vision, let's say, is very clear. We, first of all, want to offer multiple choice to our partners and to their customers, namely, let's say, the consumer. Therefore, we always, let's say, welcome competition, and we believe that the role played by the FinTech has been extremely positive and constructive for us, because as a challenger, they didn't only change and challenge the, let's say, the incumbent, but they also help us to develop new solutions, new product, let's say, and new technologies. So we have always seen the role of the FinTech and the new players as extremely positive for us because it pushed us to develop new solutions and for consumers ultimately. The way we respond also to that is twofold. Of course, we want to partner with FinTech, and in order to foster this development, we have developed ourselves specific dedicated program like StartPath, like Accelerate, that help the FinTech to come to market, to develop new solutions for consumers. And it's not by coincidence that particularly in Europe, we are the preferred, let's say, partner for FinTech in developing new solutions in the card industry. I'm just naming Revolut, N26. They brought a lot of innovations, they brought a lot of benefits to consumers with their own products, and we are extremely pleased that we have been helping them in developing, let's say, those new products and those solutions. At the same time, again, in line and consistently with our vision to offer multiple choice to our customers and to our business partner, we selectively made some minority investment in FinTech, but at the same time, like in the acquisition of Vocalink, we made a conscious decision to buy the capabilities that would enable us to offer multiple choice to our customers. So we are not necessarily anymore into exclusively only the card business, but we have the ambition also to offer solutions and products in account-to-account type of payments. I heard today talking about fast payments. This is where also we want to offer our customers and consumers new products and solutions. So we are extremely serious in becoming, let's say, a multi-rail company, not focusing only and exclusively, let's say, into cards. And again, we always welcome, let's say, the competition and the challenge brought by new players, could be big tech or even FinTech. I heard before talking about the different role of big companies versus small companies. I believe that despite the size, both those type of companies brought a lot of innovation, let's say, into the industry and into the way also we think about new products and the way we believe the ultimate customers, consumers, should be served.
Thanks a lot. You have mentioned that you are making partnerships with the other companies, with startups. Why partnerships and not acquisitions of these companies? What's the logic of that kind of approach? Isn't it obvious to have a FinTech company as a part of your structure? Small companies, they're not that expensive. What are the benefits of forging partnerships, and what are the risks then to make you, to push you by them?
We believe that we have to be selective and we have to be flexible, let's say, in our strategy, in the execution of our strategy. In some specific instances, partnership with, let's say, with FinTech is extremely important to ensure that we'll continue on both sides, let's say, to have the flexibility to continue to grow and execute our own, let's say, vision. In some other instances, like in the case of Vocalink, we decided to go for a full acquisition because we believe that acquiring the capabilities, the platform, would have enabled us to be faster in the go-to-market, in the execution of our strategy. And therefore, depending whether we want to buy or build the capabilities, we selectively decide either to partner or to buy, let's say, new entities. Also, the recently announced acquisition of Nets is consistent, let's say, with this strategy and with this vision of building the capabilities in the area where we want to grow, but more importantly, where we believe there is a demand from the market, from us, to deliver and to offer new type of solutions, new type of products. And we believe that in this context, the role of the regulators is extremely important in a twofold way. On one hand, they have to provide the level of flexibility that would ensure every type of player, could be big, could be, let's say, small, to compete under the same set of rules. And at the same time, we believe that the regulators, I heard several definitions, all of them are extremely important, could be a referee, a coach, or a conductor. Ultimately, we believe that the regulators needs to play a crucial role in ensuring a level playing field for all the different, let's say, actors in the industry. They have to flourish, they have to help and support flourishing, let's say, the development of new solutions, of new product, because they have seen the impact of technology is happening. Today, more than 80% of purchases in Europe are made through a mobile, through a cellular phone. At the same time, they need to ensure that there is, as I said, let's say, a level playing field. And therefore, their role should, let's say, support also the good functioning of this new mechanism, of these new solutions, by, for instance, ensuring a minimum security standard, or by fostering the adoption of international standard, could be at national level or at supranational level.
Thanks a lot. There is a question from the floor for you. There was an information then that you, together with Visa, has invested together with Visa into Start-up Plate. Don't you think it will be wiser to choose another startup with the same functionality rather than working jointly with your competitor, Visa? So why not another company, another startup with the same functionality, but not the same as Visa?
I'm not, let's say, personally, let's say, aware, but I believe that with Visa, we have been working together in an area which is not competitive, like setting up standards, like in the case of AMV. Another good example is SRC, where we are positively collaborating with Visa and other industry players. So that is an area where we believe that collaboration, even with competing entities, is positive overall for the industry and for the consumers, i.e. in the areas of defining the standards and ensuring that the standards will be implemented smoothly for the different use case for consumers.
Thanks a lot. I have a question for Mr. Tharmarajah. Your company has developed a tech platform which enables international transfers with a minimum commission, and still in 2011 you have received an FSA license, and now recently you have received the license in Belgium. What problems are you encountering in different jurisdictions? Could you compare these differences, and why do you select one jurisdiction or another? What are the criteria? And another question as a follow-up, what obstacles do you see for the trans-border development of your business? Because the nature of your business is cross-border.
Sure. Thank you all for having me here. Maybe I'll explain a little bit in a bit more detail about what TransferWise does. TransferWise, as explained earlier, is an international money transfer company. We started off in 2011 in London. And what we are trying to do is make sending money across the world as easy, fast, and as cheap as sending an email. For example, when you send money from one country to another, it can often take several days. That cost is often very expensive, and often you don't know how much you're getting paid. It's not the same as an email. When you send an email, whether you're sending it to Yahoo, or you're sending it to Gmail or Hotmail, you know that that email is going to arrive in 5 seconds and it's going to be free. Why should sending money, which is essentially the same thing, which is data, why is it taking so long? Why is it so expensive? So we started off in 2011. Now we are 6 million customers globally. We have about 1,500 employees. We move around $4 billion every month. And our recent valuation put us at around just over $3 billion, making us one of Europe's most valuable fintechs. And we're very proud of that. So this activity obviously needs regulating, and we work with a number of regulators all over the world. We started off with the FSA then, now the Financial Conduct Authority in London, and we obtained an e-money license. We also work with a number of regulators all over the world, including the US, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and in the EU, we recently obtained a license in Brussels, and we're looking to bring our product to Russia soon as well. I think when you look at regulators, you have to find the balance between allowing regulators to protect customers, which is important, but also allowing speed of innovation and speed of the benefits to customers. When we looked at expanding into Europe, we looked at a number of regulators, we looked at the benefits they did. Some of them over-regulate their markets, making it very, very difficult to expand into, while some of them are a lot more approachable. And I think the best regulators are the ones that allow you to come and say, hey, we want this, we want this, we want this. We understand that these are your rules now, but what about in 12 months' time? What can you change to get there? And how long will it take you to get there? And at what speed? And it's this building a relationship with regulators and also banks as well is super important, especially in the early stage of a fintech or any startup, to really have that good relationship and build a platform for success. So we did expand into Belgium to allow us, and this is primarily because of Brexit, to allow us to continue to operate. But when we look at new markets, the first thing we look at is what is the regulator, what is the central bank, and what are the banks in that market like? Do they allow an open approach to working with fintechs? Is the regulation prohibitive? Some markets, we've been applying for a license and it's taken us 2 to 3 years. Companies can start up and die within a year. I think there was a statistic that 70% of companies fail within the first 2 years. If you're waiting for a license and it takes 2 years, that's game over before you've even started. And this is fundamental for regulators to understand that not only are standards and rules important, but also speed. And this is really important. And the other thing we look at is TransferWise is in the business of moving money around the world. Unlike a bank, we don't lend money. We think the banks have that problem well looked after and they cater to that market very well. But moving money around the world is something specialist and something global and has its own problems. Therefore, we don't want to be regulated in the same way as a bank because what we do and what we offer and the problem we solve is very different. But there are specialities such as access to payment systems, for example, access to having a level playing field as a bank, which is key for us to succeed. And we talked earlier about cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. TransferWise uses existing currency rails. We use existing money. And as some of my panelists said earlier, the benefit of a digital currency isn't really that apparent because there are still so many problems that we can fix with existing money that central banks are working with us to help fix.
Thanks a lot. We, as regulators, understand that the quality of regulation is one of the factors of competitiveness of the jurisdictions to attract fintech. and it depends on the quality of the operations of the regulators and the quality of standards. And there is a question from the floor for you, Mr. Tharmarajah. Does the company plan to comply with the applicable law of the Russian Federation, and namely on the foreign payment systems? You open the deposits for Russian citizens, and it is forbidden by the applicable law. And that's the direct question, and your comments, please.
We offer our product in Russia as a deposit product. It is something we're looking at because currently we don't have a license in Russia, and we are forbidden to operate. So we partner with local payment providers to allow people to receive money in Russia, but as a customer in Russia, you can't onboard with TransferWise just yet. But it is something we look at, and that is one of the challenges that we want to overcome, is how do we work with the regulators, how do we work with banks, how do we work with central banks to allow us to comply. We would never enter into a market where we didn't comply, because our licenses, not only in Russia, but our licenses all over the world, mean that we have to comply with every bit of local regulation.
Ну, мне практически не осталось.
Okay, there's nothing me to add, and there's only one thing to add, that the company that enter the market should comply, and on the whole, the applicable law is good enough to attract the new companies, and it is intended to protect the customers, and I hope that we are prepared to interact with the transfer to amend the standards and applicable law for it to be competitive. Running out of time, but I would like to ask the panelists a question. Though this subject is complicated, it is worthy of wide discussion, but please brief answer. The technological world is global, the technologies are global, the FinTech are global, but the regulations are national. And allegedly, there is a necessity for transnational regulation, not just exchanging practices, exchanging information, but some common principles of regulations should be developed. What issues do you think should be resolved at transnational, international level? What are the issues that we should agree on? Quite possible it is too premature. Let the market develop. When it is more developed, then it will be time for international regulation. Or it is over mature. So once again, what are the areas of subjected to international regulation? And first, Mr. Fan. Indeed, the financial technologies are developing real fast. As far as international regulation is concerned, it is necessary to use the best available regulation practices and to scrap something that is not efficient. And the central banks in the different countries should cooperate, and I think that we will be cooperating with the central banks of Russia, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and the other countries.
Elvira, I want to go back to Mr. Fon's remarks regarding to M0, because when you ask question about digital currency, Mr. Fon said our first priority is to make M0 is digital. M0 is banknotes. That's the printed money. So what it implies, printed money in a digital world can buy nothing. So this is quite dramatic, because the form of the money is changing. Our friend from TransferWise, when he described money, he said data. And Mr. Fon said digital currency and M0. So since we have to admit as a central banker, paper monies, the banknotes in a digital world is not working anymore. And it's a reality that we will gonna end up with a digital currency. But the critical question is that can we sustain a world without the digital sworn borders? Because we will gonna have digital currency, but how about the national borders in the digital world? I think supranational regulation on this one is definitely answer. Answer is not at national level. But the critical thing is that do we have strong enough financial institutions to figure out optimal answer at supranational levels? We need international bodies. I'm not a pessimist person, but unfortunately, given the conjecture right now, is that we cannot, we don't have the global order to provide the right answers to these questions. But definitely answers should be at supranational level.
Thank you.
Как факт, наверное,
FinTech is a fast developing sector, and I think it is very much important to study the best available practices. As you, Elvira, have said, it is necessary to use to study the cases, and FinTech does exist in the nations, and it doesn't need international regulations, and FinTech does occupy a certain niche at the market. In due course, we will come to international regulations, but now I think the new innovative market should grow a bit. Let it gain strength, and we have to be tolerant, but in the due course we will have to undertake regulations. But right now our efforts should be focused on protecting the national markets, and I wish the decisions of the regulators should be well balanced. And of course, if the regulation is too strict, it pushes the players out of the national market, and they are looking for safe haven. So that's why regulators should be flexible and tolerant. It's something new, and the regulators should exchange experience and to regulate the FinTech.
I do not really believe in international regulation. It doesn't exist anywhere in any other sphere. I believe it is necessary to unite our effort in combating fraud, because it cannot be done within national borders only. There is no borders to the internet. As for the rest, we need to rely on our own capacities and the competences of your narrow allies. Of course, the countries compete between one another. There was a German economist, Friedrich Lies, who introduced a term called the country throwing back the ladders. As soon as a country climbs up to the peak of technological development, they throw away the ladder so that no other competitors could climb up. And this principle still works, I believe. Centuries have passed, but still this principle is there. And we need to realize that. We need to abandon any illusions, and we need to make a bet on our own capacities. We've been member of the WTO. We know how it works perfectly. The entrance barriers for the last ones who want to join. Those barriers are so high that it takes decades to overcome. China, Kazakhstan, and Russia have managed to overcome this barrier. I think the same principle applies to other industries. You have to be the leader to be ahead of the trend, or be in the trend at least. Thank you. So what you're suggesting is to be the one throwing away the ladders, that no one else can climb it. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Tittarelli, over to you.
Looking at, let me share with you what we are experiencing, let's say, with our partner, with the FinTech in particular. They are asking us global solution, global approach, because they want to operate under the same rules, under the same umbrella of products everywhere in the market. So this is, let's say, a very systemic question, but it's a dilemma at the same time. Do we need a supranational regulation that would enable us, enable everybody to operate under the set rules, or should we give priority to the protection of, let's say, national interest? I believe that supranational regulation should be limited, as I mentioned before, to the definition of standards or to the, let's say, functioning of global solutions, i.e. minimum security requirements, definition of requirements. We don't believe that regulating, let's say, the functioning of the FinTech would help, let's say, the development of the market, given, let's say, the existing level of maturity. There is another area, another sector where international regulation or international dialogue would be very welcome, i.e. combating fraud. So to me, the key word is dialogue, alignment at global level, sharing the best practice rather than trying to regulate a sector like the FinTech one, which has been bringing a lot of benefits to different parties, starting to the incumbents, but should not be, let's say, limited in its growth and its ability to continue to challenge the system right now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tharmarajah, over to you.
Sure. I think the danger of a kind of one-size-fits-all piece of regulation is it ignores that globally, whilst we are all kind of citizens of the world, we are all very different in countries. A business model that works in the US might not necessarily work here in Russia. A model that works here in Russia might not work so well in Australia. And I think whilst dialogue and kind of high-level cooperation is useful, I think at the same time you have to appreciate that regulation is designed to protect people of the country. And if you start doing that at a global level, you lose the intent of what that regulation is for, which is to protect people and protect citizens. Therefore, I think it's the responsibility of central banks and regulators to keep talking globally, but always put the citizens of their country first, because that's ultimately what they are designed to do.
Thank you very much for this brief discussion. I guess from the discussion we've been having, one might get impression that indeed both the players and the regulators so far are not quite ready, and probably there is no demand and need so far for elaboration of the joint and shared rules of the game. So far it's indeed more of a dialogue, exchange of best practices, probably a certain high-level standards that we could agree on. So indeed it is a discussion on arrangement of the general rules of behavior and prosecution of those violating the law, first and foremost cybercrime, which is indeed international, and probably the global players that already operate on the global market are more interested in a certain level of homogeneity of the rules rather than local players. That is natural. And of course, any national regulator operating in the industry are aware of the responsibility we're carrying towards our citizens. That is, of course, the key role and responsibility we're carrying. We realize that the majority of technologies are international, and indeed we need to cooperate and exchange best practices, but first and foremost be aware of the risks that may play out on the national level. And I guess the question of international cooperation would remain at the center of our attention. Generally, coming to conclusions, of our discussion. Although it is indeed very difficult to come to any conclusions because too many questions remain open. And one of the key questions is the balance, the right balance in regulation. We are all trying to get this right balance so that indeed we provide a fast track for innovations in finance. That's what we want. But on the other hand, we're all aware of the risks. And I guess each country will get its balance on their own. We'll listen to the business community and we hear them. We understand that this balance cannot be stricken without the existing models of operation. We need to find new approaches, and I agree to what Mr. Dossaev has said. We are partners in this regard, and it requires a certain change in the mindset, not just within the business community, but also within the mind of a regulator. It is a huge challenge to us. And we as a regulator, and I'm speaking as a regulator of the Central Bank of Russia, we will pay a lot of attention to risks. In Russia, FinTech is developed enough. It is quite large scale. It's not just the birth of it as it was 5 years ago. We see that it is developing on a large scale now, and we already see some risks materializing in certain areas. First and foremost, personal data protection issues, and therefore regulation will play an increasingly important role in this regard, and the market participants have to be prepared for that. The scale of financial technologies is so big that regulation has to be more extensive as well, and we'll develop this regulation in dialogue with you, and we are very much interested in technologies to grow and evolve because it is indeed a driver. It is wanted by the people, by businesses, and we see that new technological solutions are very much in demand by the consumers. It is cheap, it is convenient, it's easy, and it is totally in line with the new tempo of life in all areas. For Russia, the matter of accessibility of financial services is important, and FinTech makes them more affordable and accessible for remote location. Through the development of FinTech, we bring it back to every user, every citizen, and it is a new chance for development of competition. We need to develop competition, and FinTech enables us to do that. That is why we, as a regulator, are very much interested to find this balance in partnership with you, to develop financial technologies, and we want them to contribute to the economic growth and the growth in the quality of life of our citizens and our businesses. On your behalf, allow me to thank the participants of our discussion. Thank you very much for sharing with us your knowledge and competences, your ideas. They are indeed very valuable to us. And we're at the stage of development where we will increasingly need an exchange of best practices and ideas to elaborate best solutions. Thank you very much for your contribution to the discussion.